Can I welcome Marie and Mike Lyon, both of you here today. Thank you very much for coming to give us your oral evidence again. We have, of course, met in the past, but I just want to say that I think your outstanding commitment to the women and their children has been absolutely outstanding. And your energy and your diligence in finding out what has been going on in the past and also caring for people in the present, that has been very impressive. I just think about how you arranged for us our meetings in London, Southampton and Manchester, where we met a lot of the people who had suffered through premados and hormone pregnancy tests. And that was very, very interesting for us. We heard firsthand exactly what people were having to cope with now, as well as what had happened in the past. And so we know that you've been very involved with the expert working groups, both of them, and also all sorts of speaking engagements you've had across the world, I think, but certainly across Europe, and of course the United Kingdom. So this session is for you. It's your opportunity to think about things that we should be thinking about for our review. We are ending now the fact-finding sessions that we have been running. We started with the patient groups and we're finishing with the patient groups. And so particular issues you want to raise, anything you want to tell us, any recommendations you'd like us to make in the report, we would love to hear any of that, anything you want to tell us. And you will know that we have the cameras running and this will be screened on our website, and I hope that's all right for you. So if you could start just by saying who you are and your positions, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
My name is Mary Lyon. I'm the chair of the Association for Children Damaged by Hormone Pregnancy Tests, and at present we have a membership of about 270 families.
And you are accompanied by your husband?
Yes, I beg your pardon. Yeah, accompanied by Mike, my husband, who, quite frankly, if he didn't take me where I'm supposed to go, how would we get there anyway? So, yes, invaluable.
Right, so over to you.
Today actually has been one of the hardest days to prepare for, and it's simply because there is so much to say, and it's knowing what to say and what is being left out and which is more important. It's been really, really difficult. I have, as usual, written it down because it's easier for me to do that. And it's basically sort of a little synopsis of what has happened, the various areas that you're going to cover, and just to give a flavour, again, of evidence that maybe you haven't heard before. But I do thank you for this because it is a really good opportunity, and I just hope I do it justice. I would like to summarise really the failures of the regulatory authority and the drug companies, and again that will be a short session. It's just that it is easy to tell it as a story. One of the first things though that I would like to do, because this is really quite important, is reference the following statements that were made in the oral interviews that you've had with different people. One of the things that was said is there is a possible association, and the second thing was we have always known there was an association. So these statements were made by 3 members of the expert working group. They were repeated by the Chief Medical Officer of the UK and supported by studies from Dr. Inman, Dr. Greenberg, Professor Vargason, Professor Hennigan and Dr. Aronson. And really I think I would like to start by saying, would you agree that there has been recognised a possible association between adverse effects and hormone pregnancy tests? So that really is the first statement. And to kind of back up that possible association and the failures that actually occurred to stop those tablets being taken off the market is where I'll actually give some small pieces of evidence. We know that the Committee on Safety of Drugs was set up in 1963 in response to the thalidomide tragedy, and they also set up a year later, in 1964, the Metabolic Research Reactions Unit. Now this was incorporated, as I say, into the CSD in 1964, and the specific term of reference was to assemble and assess reports of adverse reactions of drugs and to study the mode of action of certain hormones. Now that was the specific area that they were going to cover. So prior to setting up the Committee on Safety of Drugs, there had been a widespread concern about the number of deaths from thromboembolic events related to oral contraceptives. This information had not been shared with the medical profession, and could this maybe have been a reason why they wanted to focus on certain hormones within that particular unit? Also, the Dunlop Committee, named after Sir Derek Dunlop, who was chair of the new CSD, informed doctors at the time that they could destroy medical notes if they felt at risk from prosecution for prescribing drugs which had produced adverse effects. And he did qualify that by saying no matter how wrong that would be, but basically gave them permission. The German state published an internal report dated 30th of November 1961, which actually cited Duganon, which is the German name for Primados, as one of the possible causes of thalidomide. So again, could the new Safety on Drugs Committee have been aware of this report, which would further influence their decision to focus on certain hormones? I have looked at a publication by the historian Jesse Olshenko-Grin because it does contain some good archival research which may shed some light on the documented historical evidence of the regulatory failures by the Committee on Safety of Drugs 1963 to 1970 and the Committee on Safety of Medicines 1970 to 2005. Documents had identified that between 1961 and 1971 the NHS were facing a financial crisis as laboratories failed to keep pace with the rising demand for tests, and that was including pregnancy tests, but these tests had doubled within that period 1961 to 71. Primados at the time cost 5 shillings against £2 for the Organon Prognosticon, which was a non-invasive test which they used small commercial laboratories for. So basically there was a lucrative opportunity in the failing NHS, and that was soon captured by Shearing and Roussel, who are now Bayer and Sanofi. However, in 1966, suddenly Amenorrhon 40 was removed from the index without explanation, so there was no longer the opportunity to use that as a hormone pregnancy test, and it also had the same components as Primados. The government health regulators at that time were permitted to have financial interests in drug companies, either as shareholders or receipt of research grants, but this introduced a possibility of conflicts of interest, and that will be more explainable when you look at the way that other countries actually operated. In Norway, for example, pharmaceutical products were assessed by expert valuation and not commercial potential, and that actually removed some of those conflicts of interest from the regulator. Dr. Inman had worked closely with Shearings on their oral contraceptive because at the time, as I say, there had been quite a few deaths, so he'd then helped them manufacture the mini pill. So he had a very close relationship with Shearing, AG and the UK subsidiary. So could his decision to endorse the discrete removal of the indication from Primados in 1970 being influenced by his collaboration on Shearing's oral contraceptive pill? Was the government regulator fulfilling his duties as government principal medical officer when he withheld the information of that removal from members of the medical profession and prospective mothers for 5 years after that discrete withdrawal? Could financial interests have been the motivation for his advance warning to Shearing about the shocking results of his own study into HPTs, a warning he did not disclose to the medical profession and the public for a further 5 months. Dr. Inman was Principal Medical Officer between 1967 and 1978 and the government advisor responsible for deciding what action or not to take on Primados and Amenorrhone 40. Can we believe that Dr. Inman mistakenly provided Roland Moyle, the Minister, the Government Health Minister, with misleading and unfounded statistics from the German Research Foundation? Those statistics were quoted by Mr. Moyle in Parliament, they're on Hansard, to support his refusal for the public inquiry requested by Mr. Jack Ashley. Instead of agreeing an inquiry, Mr. Moyle advised parents they would have to pay for research to provide a causal connection. This obligation stipulated by the Government Health Minister is still the same obligation we are facing today. In his speech in the House of Lords in February this year, Lord Alton of Liverpool stated, "They, the association, have faced the implacable determination of regulatory bodies spending huge amounts of public money on ad hoc scientific reviews to cast doubt on the work of highly reputable scientists." Lord Alton is right to highlight the deliberately unrealistic obligation that we are under to provide a causal association for Primados. The unrealistic demand from the Commission on Human Medicines and MHRA and the European Medicine Agency are put into perspective by a statement made in 2014 by the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization stated, "It is clear thalidomide has an effect on the embryo, but no single effect has convincingly been shown to be the cause of the thalidomide syndrome. Yet we are asked to provide a causal link for Primados." In Dr. Inman's book, Don't Tell the Patient, quite ironic really, he justified withholding information about Primados by citing the possible impact on oral contraceptives. Dr. Inman also supported the World Health Organization concerns about a population explosion if the links between the pill and HPTs were made public. Dr. Inman's lack of action was contrary to his defined responsibilities as Principal Medical Officer. In 1968, an article published in Norway stated, "The diagnostic method is so uncertain, which in itself is a reason not to use it." The Committee on Safety of Medicines would have been aware that Norway subsequently produced a study linking hyperspadia and congenital abnormalities to the use of HPTs, and those findings increased the urgency for Norway to remove HPTs from the market. They even stated, even circumstantial evidence should exhort caution. In 1970, the indication for pregnancy was removed in Norway, and in 1972, an explicit warning against the use of Primados stated it could cause fetal malformations. More European countries followed suit in 1971, 1972 and 1973, but no warnings were issued in the UK and the hormone pregnancy test was still available. In 1975, the FDA issued a notice. The risk of teratogenicity precludes the use of hormones as a diagnostic tool for pregnancy. With the overwhelming evidence from scientists in the UK and abroad, plus the results of his own study, Dr. Inman was forced to take action, and the first warning notice was issued in June 1975, but only after first alerting Shearing about the association he had found in his own study. The CSM issued a second warning notice in November 1977, which stated, "Further results have now been published and the association has been confirmed." Despite these warnings from the CSM, Primados remained available in the UK until 1978. I previously provided a timeline of the historic scientific warnings received by the regulator, and you will be relieved to know I won't be repeating them. However, I will draw your attention to a small example of additional warnings you may not be aware of. Brief notes written by shearing scientists who carried out the tests on Primodos include: a connection cannot be excluded with certainty, the substance cannot be ruled out, and there is a strong correlation. Also, on page 42 of the Expert Working Group report, there is reference to historic evidence which showed that Primodos had a teratogenic effect in mice, which was found to be drug-related. Additional evidence was found in the Royal College of General Practitioners by Liz Lane from Sky News. Handwritten letter from Dr. Norman Dean states, "I have a bad conscience, though not really on my own behalf, about this whole business." Dr. Dean had asked Shearings to withdraw Primodos from the market in 1969 after finding a high incidence of abortions in his study. Dr. Inman wrote to Shearings to advise against Dr. Dean's request to withdraw Primodos. Dr. Fleming, also from the Royal College, stated that from his evaluation of the data, he believes there is a distinct possibility that HPTs might cause abortion. If called into trial, he would be forced to mention a possible connection between the drug and abortions. In a statement, Dr. Fleming said, "Some of the cases in the Royal College records would probably provide better evidence for the plaintiffs than the evidence they already have." Documents in the Royal College files also discuss fears of a claim for damages against the college because of negligence relating to Primodos. They stated, "There is no way this data can be kept from the claimants. However, this need not be a source of alarm, as we've already given all our findings to the Committee on Safety of Medicines. We didn't see those findings. I don't know where they are." Dr. Inman did not reveal the results of the study, and nor did Shearing, who actually financed the study. Could this be linked to Dr. Inman's request to be subpoenaed by Shearing to discredit his own study in court? If the Royal College report had been submitted, would this have provided Dr. Inman with the opportunity to dispute these findings also? Despite the weight of scientific evidence, the acknowledged warnings from the medical profession, the removal in 1970 as a pregnancy test in Norway, subsequent removal by other European countries in 71, 72 and 73, plus the provisional findings in the Royal College study and subsequent request to remove Primodos as a pregnancy test, they all failed to mobilise the regulator to fulfil his obligations to take action on HPTs. These facts are a damning indictment of the indisputable and catastrophic failure of the regulatory authorities. Which brings us to the regulatory process today. Currently, scientific evidence is from Professor Neil Vargason, who produced a zebrafish study in 2017. The study was peer-reviewed and acknowledged as robust. Professor Vargason did not claim his study was conclusive, but that it indicated evidence of harm. When the components of Primodos were added to the zebrafish embryo, there was clear evidence of abnormalities. Zebrafish are acknowledged to be similar to the human embryo and are used in increasing numbers in scientific studies today. When Professor Vargason's study was published, he sent it to the Expert Working Group team. The response from the Commission on Human Medicines was to recruit another ad hoc group of scientists to review his study. The Commissioner also sent the information to the European Medicines Agency with a request for a similar review. The European Medicines Agency did not ask to meet Professor Vargason and based their results on the information provided by the Commission on Human Medicines. 2018, Professor Carl Hennigan and Dr. Jeff Aronson produced a meta-analysis based on the evidence previously reviewed by the Expert Working Group in 2017. The Hennigan-Aronson meta-analysis concluded there was a clear association between the use of HPTs and congenital abnormalities documented in the historic studies. This conclusion was completely opposite to the conclusion of the Expert Working Group. After the publication of the meta-analysis, the Commissioner recruited more scientists and another ad hoc review and commissioned a further review by the European Medicines Agency. Once again, the Medicines Agency did not speak to either Professor Hennigan or Dr. Aronson. I will remind you of Lord Alton's statement in the House of Lords, the implacable determination of regulatory bodies to cast doubt on highly reputable scientists. Professor Neil Vargason is Chair and Professor of Development Biology at Aberdeen University, has extensive work and research experience in embryonic limb development, thalidomide and vascular development. He is independent and has not received funding for his work on hormone pregnancy tests. Professor Hennigan is a clinical epidemiologist and leading expert in evidence-based medicine. He is also Director of Evidence-Based Medicine and a practicing GP with years of patient contact, including pregnancy tests. Dr. Aronson is a consultant physician and clinical pharmacologist in the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine in Oxford. Both Professor Hennigan and Dr. Aronson are independent and did not receive funding for producing their meta-analysis. However, I will break off there because what was suggested in the review on their study was that they'd had assistance from the association. Now, what assistance we were supposed to give them, I really don't know. So Lord Alton's statement highlights that nothing has changed in the regulatory process since the 1960s. It is still a culture of protect and deny, while using public money to attempt to cast doubt on the work of highly reputable scientists. The Chief Medical Officer in the UK made a statement in her recent oral evidence which indicated that Professor Vargason had stated that zebrafish recovered after being immersed in water. Now, was this another attempt to cast doubt on the independent scientific evidence, or was the CMO incorrectly advised? I would hope it was the second. It is certainly at odds with the statement also made by the CMO that science only has value if we have public trust, confidence in the process, and greater transparency. Well, that would be great if that was true. I contacted Professor Vargason, as my understanding from observing the review was that he had commented that zebrafish made some recovery in the water but did not reverse the damage. Professor Vargason confirmed that the fish did not recover from the damage, which he says he made clear during the expert work group meeting in 2017. He is also continuing his research and at the moment finds that much lower doses are still causing subtle damage to the fish. He has said if you wish to speak to him, he will be very happy to update you on his current progress, but obviously at the moment it's not published, so he would prefer that he actually has a conversation about it. The review by the Commission on Human Medicines and the European Medicines Agency of the meta-analysis does not have public trust or confidence and was clearly not transparent. We were advised that the ad hoc meeting would be recorded, but the recording would be destroyed immediately after the meeting concluded. Paper minutes of the discussions would be produced. The Chair reminded those present to declare any personal interest in the drug companies, example, lecture fees, travel, accommodation and consultancies. But the Chair forgot to disclose that he'd been chair of an ad hoc group who produced extensive work on oral contraceptives, published in the BMJ in 2010. The work was financed by Shearing AG, Shearing Healthcare, Wyeth and Searle, all companies listed as conflicts of interest. Interestingly, it's also the guardian of the Royal College of General Practitioners' oral contraceptive studies of 43 years ago, so he may know where the evidence is. The Chair stated there would be no discussions of the expert working group report that was produced in 2017, and he confirmed that the participants in the review had no association with the 2017 report or with the members of the expert working group responsible for it. Based on the ad hoc review, during the ad hoc review, 2 of the scientists consistently criticised the Newcastle-Ottawa scale used in the meta-analysis by Hennigan and Aronson, whilst at the same time promoting the Robbins 1 scale as a better analytical tool. Now, these 2 scientists were key to the decision-making process. What was not disclosed was the fact that they were lead authors on Robbins 1, or that the study was financed by GSK and Pfizer, both drug companies again listed under personal interests. I read a review of the Robbins 1, and what it said was, difficult and demanding even for raters with substantial expertise. What was also not disclosed was that Professor Stephen Evans, the lead scientist of the expert working group review, is a collaborator on Robbins 1, and of course it would be feasible that he would be in contact with the 2 scientists included in the review, and this calls into question the statement made by the chair that members of the ad hoc group would have no association with members of the expert working group. In his oral evidence to yourselves, Professor Evans was highly critical of the decision by Hennigan and Aronson to perform a meta-analysis, and declared that you should only perform a meta-analysis for randomised trials. Now, this statement was based on a publication of which he was the author. However, on obtaining a copy of the publication, it clearly sets out that Professor Hennigan met the conditions appropriate to effect a meta-analysis, which actually contradicts the oral statement made by Professor Evans. Maybe he's not read his own book. The MHRA employee who presented a 20-page critical review of the meta-analysis before Professor Hennigan and Dr. Aronson presented their findings worked on a maternity data project with another key member of the expert working group from 2009 to 2012. When I contacted Dr. Rain about my belief that this was another conflict of interest, she replied, "The presenter has not had contact with the member since November 2016. However, the expert working group review began in 2015. On receipt of the report from the Commission on Human Medicines, the name of one of the assessors has been redacted, and I believe that this is the name of the person I disputed. It is also of great concern that the chair of the European Medicines Agency never stops, who oversaw the review of both studies of Professor Vargason, Hennigan and Aronson, was employed by Bayer for 12 years, between 1989 and 2002. He was also divisional head for the German Federal Institute from 2005 to 2016 and section head from 2016 to 2018. Now, the German Federal Institute is a former BGA, and they were the regulators who declared they were advocates for shearing and requested studies which did not contain malformations. The BGA are now known as BfArM. An observer from BfArM was invited to attend every expert working group meeting, although requests for other experts to attend had been refused. We're nearly there. Very nearly there. In light of these findings, I think we have every justification to dispute the independence and question the transparency of the scientific reviews by the regulatory agencies, both here and in Europe. But nobody looks at the moral and ethical considerations. And this is a statement from Tim Lewins, Professor of Philosophy and Science at the University of Cambridge. There have been numerous suggestions that establishing a causal link with considerable confidence is a necessary precondition to establishing regulatory failure. A responsible regulator should take a precautionary approach, which often means taking measures to reduce potential risks even when causation has not been established with any certainty. This is especially clear in the Primados case, where medical need was unclear and alternatives were available. I think that the opinion from Professor Lewin sums up the fault with the current regulatory process, which continues to focus on proving a causal association, perpetuating the moral and ethical failures of the regulatory agencies. I would like to reference the statement in the thalidomide judgment and that was, in case of severe damage, protection measures have to be taken even if the suspicious circumstances are relatively small. Extremely severe damage, such as malformations, forces the drug company, the drug manufacturer, to respond, even when there exists only the possibility. With this judgment in mind, was it ethical to keep the pregnancy test on the market when there were numerous reports of adverse reactions and the manufacturer is unable to provide any reassurance of its safety? Was it ethical for the regulator to delay 8 years before issuing the first adverse reaction warning, while confessing at the same time he had no defence for the 8-year delay? A statement which I feel would indicate he had full knowledge of the serious concerns surrounding HPTs. You have been clear that your mandate is to review past regulatory failures if they exist. I feel the evidence presented to you proves there were huge failures by the regulator. You have also been clear that you will not review the science as you do not have the expertise available to you, and again, absolutely fine. But what I hope you will review is the expertise, appropriate experience and scientific qualifications of the independent scientists. The expertise, appropriate experience and scientific qualifications of the experts chosen by the regulator to review the work of Vargason, Hennigan and Aronson. The independence and conflicts of interest of the experts chosen by the regulator, and the transparency of the scientific evidence provided by the independent scientific experts against the lack of transparency of the subsequent critical reviews by the regulators, for example, missing information, the forest plots, destruction of recordings, failure to declare conflicts of interest. And I have lost a page, which I'm sure no, I've not blinked on the back, sorry about that. And I will conclude before you lose the will to live, right? The conclusions our members would like to see are an apology from the current regulators who have perpetuated the failures of their predecessors by refusing to acknowledge an association between HPTs and adverse effects. A statement from our government health authority to confirm that past regulatory failures have been identified and will be acknowledged. A commitment from the government to provide financial support to our members with medical needs, resulting from HPTs. Financial redress to be provided to all members by both Bayer Shearing and the government health agencies responsible for regulating the pharmaceutical industry. What I have done is actually brought just a couple of the older documents which you may not have seen. And again, this is another Shearing document, which again talks about on part of this, it's a conversation that they've had about various studies, and it says 40% of the works collected would incriminate, I don't know if it's gestigans or gestigans, I don't know how you say it, but basically it's the hormones. It was also, again, talking about the possible virilization of feminizing effects are deliberately separated from this assessment, because what they said was there were no adverse effects apart from virilization, and then at the end it does say that through conversation they were told that there could be 40% of those tablets having an effect. In 1978 from the Board of Directors, and this is actually stating that they will not remove Duganon from the world, which is Primados, but will continue distributing the product under the trademark Berlinen as a possible alternative. They also talk about to continue supplying Duganon, which then will produce and distribute the product on its own without mentioning the name Shearing. So they're starting to distance themselves. This is another one, and this is relating to Korea. And again, they're talking about Duganon has been and is being used improperly because of our emissions. Packages are still being sold with out-of-date instructions. So again, this was another instance where they're aware that the tablets are still available, that they are actually being used, and we know what improperly means. It means that they were being used for abortion. And they're saying to prevent situations that could lead to additional claims for damages against shearing. It was therefore decided that the Primodos Committee would meet again in May 1978 to deal with these matters. And there might be an issue of a possible worldwide recall of Duganon. But they didn't. This one again is talking about the BGA, as they were bee farmers now, where they spoke to Professor von Eichstädt, who again had asked for the studies which did not yield a statistically significant correlation, and he also mentioned somewhere in there about keeping the drug on the market. The last one is quite interesting because this is from David Finney, who was a member of the Department of Statistics, which of course was aligned to the Commission on Adverse Reactions Committee. And he said he'd been asked would he actually cooperate with shearings, and his answer was it would be embarrassing to try to advise on problems which are likely to come before the subcommittee. So basically he's agreeing, yes, actually they're going to come because there is something there that is a link between the drugs and the adverse reactions. And that is, oh my God, I've got so much. This is the problem, there's so much, and it's trying to find out what would be useful for you.
Well, thank you so much. So can I just recap your recommendations? Mm-hmm. One was that you felt that there should be confirmation and acknowledgement of financial
that is very
support
important.
From the regulator.
And
Were you saying from the regulator?
Yes.
The second one was about financial redress, etc.
Yes.
And again from the agency, and that's really in a way the same sort of area. Were there other recommendations I've missed?
I think really, I think we do deserve a statement from the government just to say we made a mistake. I think that's quite important, and it's just to confirm that there were regulatory failures in the past. Things could have been done better. There are ways that we can actually try to improve what happens today, because obviously what happens today is still the same kind of culture, where we're looking at how do we actually defend this. We're not looking at what did they find? Is this something that could actually harm people? Is this something that we should take notice of, do further research on? It just seems to be the initial way that they look at it is to look at ways to actually say, well, actually this isn't right, the process isn't right. They talk about biases, but they don't actually mention what the biases are. Confounding factors, but what are they? So this is where I found it really frustrating when I read the records from both Professor Hennigan's study and from Professor Vargason's, because there's no meat there. It's all a bit of an opinion and supposition, and particularly in the original expert working group report, where they actually omitted to mention that they thought that there was a possible association and concentrated on stating there was no causal association. So if they knew, as they quite plainly said in their submission to yourselves, that there was this possible association, why was that not highlighted? Why was it then actually told to people, if you're taking an oral contraceptive and you're pregnant, don't worry about it, it won't do you any harm? And that really would encourage women to think, oh, well, it doesn't matter, I've already taken them now. So it's that kind of thinking where it's not just the fact that they're denying the past, but I feel that they're actually harming the future, because they're refusing to actually look at what we can do to make things better. And that's the biggest concern that I have. We need to have a process that is truly independent, that actually has scientists that are not aligned to either the pharmaceutical company or to the regulator. And this is what we've found time after time. The people who actually join these committees for the MHRA and the Commission of Human Medicines all have some form of prior link. And in fact, I'm sure there's a little pool somewhere that they just dip in and take them out when they need them, and they perform in the way that they're supposed to perform. And that's an opinion from me, and that's the way I feel. But I know that's also how our members feel, that there is this determination to continue to deny that there was ever a reason to have even just caution. You know, don't take it off the market, but caution people, advise them that there may be risks, which we were never told. Advise the medical community, you know, you must actually look at this and make a decision, an informed decision. Just suspend it, even suspend it, to actually say to the manufacturer, please go back. But the other thing is, insist on seeing those documents. Because I do know from all the documents I've looked through, they have ghosting studies where someone actually writes them and then they just sign up as if it's fact. I know that some of the studies that they do never actually see the light of day. And we, somehow or other, our regulatory system doesn't have the authority, the legal authority, to say to those firms, we want to see your testing results. And that is a dreadful, dreadful thing in 2019, that we haven't got the power to protect our people by saying, I want to see where the risks are. Those risks then can be explained, and then it's up to the individual to say, I'm willing to take that risk. I do know that some drugs are actually vital because people live without them. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't keep trying to produce new drugs, but let's try as well and value the ones that we already have that we know are working. And I think this is where it came with Primados and with the hormone pregnancy test. It was a new thing and it was lucrative, very lucrative. So when you actually look at the spin-offs as well with the abortive patient, because I did say, I don't know if I'd sent it in writing, that there are today still these tablets on the market. You're talking about Peru, France, I've got the other one now. No. Anyway, Lebanon in 2017. There is a shipping order to Lebanon with these drugs. Now, I don't know if there's a patient information leaflet in there or why Lebanon would need them, because if they're only used for amenorrhea, why would you need a shipment in this day and age when it's actually well known that amenorrhea very often could be a symptom of pregnancy? So we know that these drugs are still going. We know that Shearing, or Bayer as they are now, are still manufacturing them. And part of that is simply because of the abortive effect. We know that in Ireland in 1997, there are 1,000 packets a month being shipped to Ireland because abortion was illegal in Ireland. And this is one reason I feel that with so few people coming forward in Ireland, because bless them, you know, if they genuinely went for a hormone pregnancy test and then found out what the usage was, they would not want to come forward. And I think this is the problem with quite a few women that, I mean, I didn't know the other indication till I started looking into this, and I think, in fairness, the majority of our members didn't.
Can I just interrupt you? Because
yes, of course.
I don't understand the abortion fully, because is the proposition that in the recommended dose for a pregnancy test it can cause abortion, or that they were taking it in much bigger doses?
I think they were taking it in much bigger doses.
How did they get hold of them? Because nobody would have prescribed them for that purpose.
Amenorrhea.
Yes, but that would be a dose, that would be at a recognised dose.
But I think didn't they get something like 4 weeks? It was more than 2 tablets.
I see.
It was actually, I don't know if it was something like it may have been 2, it may have been 4 weeks. I know it's documented somewhere that it's for short duration.
It's a course, not just
It is a course, it's not, no, it's not just 2. But they were actually being sent over to Ireland for amenorrhea,
Yes.
at the time in 1978, but there were an awful lot of
But the
women.
recommended dose for its use for amenorrhea was not just one tablet,
Yeah.
12 hours apart.
No, it was. I think it was every day for a certain period of time.
Thank you.
So of course, if you had those and you wanted to take 3 or 4, and I'm not saying that's what happened. I really don't know. It is supposition. It is looking at, trying to think. Well, if there were so many packages going over, would there really be 1,000 women needing these every month?
When was this, by the way?
Ireland.
You went there.
1978.
Thank you.
So already it was known that they were a danger as a pregnancy test. And I think also it had started to be made aware that amenorrhea was actually an indication that you could be pregnant. Because I'm sure that later on they actually changed the advice to you had to be certain you were not pregnant before you were treated for amenorrhea. So that again kind of changed the way that the drugs were used.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you, Marie, you, as I understand it in your statement to us, have made it very clear that we are not expected to re-examine the science.
Yes.
And thank you for that, because certainly that was in the Secretary of State's statement to us when he launched the review. But presumably you are still interested in the way that the particular
There's all these
EWG, the 2 EWGs, the working groups, the process of those, and that area you're still really are very interested in.
You're very concerned about it,
Yes.
absolutely, because I was at those meetings and I know from the notes I took that actually it wasn't that everyone thought there was no link. You know, the conversations that occurred whilst I was in the room were definitely, whoa, this looks, quite interesting, and I couldn't confidently say I don't think there's a link. But the other big thing that came through was that the evidence that came was inconclusive because there wasn't enough of it, and that was said quite often, there isn't enough, we need more. And I know that there were nearly 7,000 pages that I found in the Landesarchive in Berlin. Those 7,000 pages did not end up with the expert working group. And in fact, the German documents that I desperately wanted to be translated were not translated till just before next to the last meeting. So to try and take that information in such a short space of time, one time we got 2,000 pages and we had, I think it was 6 days to look at them. That's a lot of them, and especially for a layperson, it's really difficult. But it had been said by one of the expert working group, why are these documents being reviewed before coming to us? Are we not getting them all? And the response was, well, we actually take a view that we will look at what we have and decide what you need to look at. So that was the biggest concern. And that's
Stop. Who was saying that?
One of the expert working group scientists.
Oh, right.
And that was what.
So they were choosing the information that was coming
The
forward.
MHRA were choosing the information
The
from
MHRA.
the MHRA was Secretariat. So they had responsibility for actually handing out the documents before each meeting. And that was a big concern to the experts themselves, I feel, because there was a distinct division. There was the decision-making group and the participants who participated in all the discussions. They were not allowed into the small decision-making group. And it was those people who were saying, we need to see more of this. Another comment quite often was, why when you ask us to make a decision, is it always in the negative? Do you not think that, or don't you feel that this isn't? Why is it never, do you not feel that there may be something in this document? So there were concerns from quite a few of the people who were there. And I felt from From the first day, it was a battle for me because I'd had a prior meeting with the MHRA, which included Dr. June Rain, and I think there were 5 people from the MHRA. And I battled because I had been told that I would be an observer and allowed to contribute with information I felt that they needed to know. And when we got to that very first meeting, prior to the group starting, I was told, no, you will be an observer only. So the ensuing discussions actually overturned that, and I was then advised, yes, if you feel that there is anything that you feel is wrong or you have a point to make, you will be allowed to speak. And unfortunately, the first meeting, there was some information which I put my hand up and tried to tell the chair, and was told to please put my hand down. It was not my place to ask to speak. I was not allowed to speak. That had been agreed at the previous meeting. I then tried to explain it had been overturned, and of course that was the first letter that went off to the MHRA to say, hello, excuse me, there's the document that you agreed, you're now changing the goalposts. And it seemed to go from there that you had the people who were genuinely wanting to know what have you got, and the others that were quite sceptical about what the information was and where it had come from.
You represented the association?
Yes.
Were you on your own, or was
Yes.
there another person with you?
No. They had allowed Nick Dobrick, but he was sat basically at one end of the room, I was sat at the other. So yes, I was alone during those meetings, which was not a great problem most of the time. I was concerned that at the second meeting and thereafter there was a barrister, and I did ask, would it be possible that we could actually bring a barrister, just again to support, and the answer was no. This is not combative. This is and it's not an inquiry.
But the other person was in the meetings. He was on the group. Nick.
Yes. He was. Oh no. He was like me. He was supposed to be an observer.
But he was there.
Oh yes, he was there. He was there. But that was basically the tenor of the meetings would generally be that you would have certain people that would drive the conclusions, and other people that would maybe not disagree with the conclusions but ask for clarification, and that then tended to be overridden. And the one concern I had was because of the amount of evidence that hadn't been looked at. I wrote to the chair. Well, I wasn't allowed to write to the chair. I had to write to the MHRA, who would decide if I was allowed to have the letter sent on. And I asked if there was a possibility of a 20-minute spot to speak to the members of the expert working group. And I had an email back to say, you have to let us know what you're going to say. So I said, well, I just wanted to basically update them on the information we have, and it was a no. So I decided to get this information and send it via email to each member of the expert working group. I was then admonished at the next meeting by the chair that I had basically overstepped the boundary. I was not allowed to contact them. It didn't actually matter because they got it. So that was fine. But the second disagreement came when I was told at the next to last meeting, which I didn't know it was going to be the next to last, that I'd been given 20 minutes to actually give any further evidence. So, which was wonderful. So I started to give this, and I did exactly what I did today. I went to turn over the last page and couldn't see it. And the chair just said, right, thank you. And I actually said, I'm really sorry, but I have got it, but I haven't finished. No, I'm sorry, but time is up, and basically sit down. One of the experts that was very sympathetic came to me and said, how much did you have left to read? I said, it was only a page and a half. And she said, leave it to me. So she went to the chair and said, I feel that Mrs. Lyon should be allowed to continue with the presentation. And the response was, you have 2 minutes. I read very quickly. So basically, it was always going to be a difficult situation with some of the expert working group, but particularly with the chair. And that was a disappointment for me.
Can I ask about the EMA's investigation into anything? Because that was conducted at broadly the same time. They published on the same day as the
Coincidentally.
Yes. You didn't get a chance to go to the EMA?
I wrote and asked them, and then I rang them and asked, could I please observe? And the answer was no.
Did they give a reason for that?
No, none whatsoever. It was just a straightforward no. Sorry.
And when you read their conclusions,
Mm-hmm.
what are your thoughts about what they said as compared to the work of the EWG and what they said?
I felt that they had strengthened a little bit. They'd learned from the expert working group's mistake, and they were more definite about the fact that there was no concerns for future use of the drug, and that there was not basically a strong enough case. But again, I think that was towards the causal link. So you have to put that in perspective and look at the fact that we can't have a causal link. You know, if thalidomide are still struggling now to actually get that scientific certainty, well, I'm absolutely sure that Primados will be in the same sort of position. I think it's worth mentioning as well that there were millions and millions of thalidomide tablets. There was 1.25 million Primados tablets, and yet in this country we had nearly 700 people affected. With thalidomide there were 540, something like that. So, you know, you have to think then of the percentages. And the other similarity is that with thalidomide, because it was so apparent with the limbs, it was much more quickly identified, because with Primados it could be quite some time before that connection was made, particularly with heart disease or internal organs. So I think, again, there was a misstep there, because it wasn't something that we were looking for. I certainly didn't look for it, and I certainly did not think of it when my daughter was born. It never occurred to me it could have anything to do with those 2 tablets. And we find today, I had 2 phone calls last week, again from 2 new people, and this lady took it twice. And she said, I thought everybody did that. I said, no, I thought you had to take it. That's what I was told. First baby she miscarried at 6 months, and the second one died after 2 days. But she still hadn't connected it until she saw something on, I don't know if it was in one of the, I think it was the Scottish Daily Record. We've just done a big article in there. So again, there isn't the recognition that there was with thalidomide, where it was an immediate and worldwide, obviously, because some of the effects were just dreadful. So you could understand why it became known very quickly. Primados was always covered up, and it was covered up, as I've said before, because of the impact on the oral contraceptive. And in Dr. Immon's book, he makes that very, very clear, where he said, don't tell the patient, which he didn't, that he was concerned, and the World Health Organization were also concerned, about the fact that women would stop taking the pill, or if they'd taken it inadvertently and found they were pregnant, that they would abort the baby. And I understand that. I absolutely understand that that was a big concern, but that shouldn't have sacrificed the number of women who then went on, like me, to take the tablets without any knowledge whatsoever of what they contained. So again, you can see why this has happened, but it doesn't make it right.
Can I go to your 4 recommendations again? The apologies from the current regulator,
Yes.
who made the point about the denying the past
Yes.
harms the future. The second point was that you want the government acknowledgement and agreement to that first proposition.
Yes.
Right. The third one was financial support for your members.
Particularly the members who have still got really,
Yes.
dreadful
I
harms.
understand.
Yes.
And the fourth one was financial redress from government and industry. Can you explain the difference between 3 and 4?
Yeah, 3 was for
Financial support for
the children.
the children.
Yes.
And
Number
then
4 is for the mothers who have lost the babies,
Yes.
who miscarried, stillborn. I would like to think that they would be recognised, because for them, they don't even have a child. So that's why I made the difference between the two. We have members who are still caring for the children, as you know, and have the worry of what will happen to them. We do know now that a lot of our members are actually finding life quite difficult because it's accelerating as they age. But there are people who are far worse off, and it would make a massive difference to them if they were unable to work. You spoke to Daniel and you spoke to Nikki, and again, that is the calibre of the members, that they do not want to be, it's hard to put this, not reliant on the state, that I don't mean that, but they don't want to feel an obligation that they're taking a handout. I think what we need to kind of feel is, well, actually this is something that you deserve because there was an injustice done, and this now needs to be recompensed, redressed, whichever way that you want to say it. And again, had this happened, and at the time we had been told, good heavens, yeah, it's the drug, we didn't realise it, I can honestly say I don't think any of our members would have taken it any further. I think it would have been a case of, we were unlucky, and we were, but they recognised that we were unlucky. The drug company did something about it and took it off the market, and the regulator gave the necessary warnings and stopped the product from being used. And I genuinely think even today, if a genuine mistake has been made, most people will accept that. But I think the stage that we're at now, we have battled for so long that I think we feel justified in, and I am speaking for the members, it's not necessarily always my point of view, but I feel it is justified to say that there now needs to be some form of recognition financially. But the most important thing, and this is just for me, is the acknowledgement. Yes, we did know. I mean, we know they know because we've got all the evidence, it's written down. But for somebody to actually say once and for all, actually, it was a mistake. It should have been rectified at the time, and we're sorry that it wasn't. But the people I really want to say sorry are the current regulators. I think they behaved abominably. I feel that the way that these reviews have been conducted, particularly the last one, which I thought was so stressful, the anger in that room was palpable, and that is not how you have a review. And again, it was, to me, it seemed a concerted effort to discard the tool that they had used, Professor Hennigan, and they just kept going on about, this is why I looked at Robin's one, what is Robin's one that was so wonderful, and what was so wrong with the tool that they used. And it's only when you look that it is horrifying actually to look at that and think, how on earth could they have been involved? How on earth could they have had a link with Stephen Evans, a link with one of the presenters, even the chair having a link with Shearings? And that's horrifying, and that needs to be stopped. But I feel that we are justified in asking for an apology for the way that they're conducting themselves today.
Can I say that's very impressive, thank you. When we saw Daniel Mason
Yes,
and Nikki Gubbin,
yes,
they were extremely dignified, they were intelligent, they were brave, they were
Yes,
courageous,
they were.
and I have to say I think we were all hugely impressed by them. But what I just wonder about it, in one of the other areas we're working at, the medication actually affects, we believe, the brain of the...
It does.
And I wondered, just listening to Daniel and Nikki, they were so eloquent.
They were.
Does the, and I should know this, but does the Primados or those hormone pregnancy tests, do they affect the brain as well?
That was the first warning that we had actually in 1958 from Dr. Edwards, who actually said that he had great concerns. I don't know if he was doing a study on the mental awareness, I actually can't remember, but he did say that he felt that there could be an effect. We're not sure whether that would be an additional effect with someone like Daniel and Nikki. And we do know that quite a few of our members had children who were brain damaged.
I see.
Absolutely, but we also know that a lot of the stillbirths, or the babies who died very soon afterwards, they had no top of the head. It was just all missing. And that happened to quite a few, and in fact, one of them was actually put on a trolley, covered with a cloth, and a husband found the baby an hour later, still alive, and lived for 48 hours. So that unfortunately was the culture. Babies were taken away, the mothers could not see them, and this has been the despair, I think, of a lot of our members, and this is why I feel they need some sort of redress. They never even saw the babies. I'm involved at the moment with a wonderful lady who's actually looking for the graves of some of the babies because they don't even know where they're buried, and she's been successful in finding 2, which is just wonderful news. And as one mum wrote to me, she sent a photograph and it's under a tree, and she said, I'm at peace. I know where my baby is. And this is the dreadful things that don't come out in studies, that don't come out in reviews, that people, scientists maybe don't always look at. And I think we're lucky in that, particularly with Professor Hennigan, who's a GP, he knows what the human cost is, and I think that's where he took exception with some of the evidence where they were saying, well, you know, women only go for a pregnancy test when they're 2 or 3 months over, or no. You go, well, we did, you go as soon as you've missed a period and you're hoping that you're pregnant. And this was where he feels that his experience, and Dr. Aronson's, is that they have dealt with illness face to face, as well as being scientists, so they know what the effects will be long term as well. And I think this is why he felt he wanted to actually look at the expert working group report. And it was only when he looked at that and the documents were actually released to him that he just felt there was a great injustice. And that's what drives him on, not money, because he doesn't get hundreds of thousands for what he does, but just the desire, and as he was quite clear, which he said at the meeting a few weeks ago, when I rang him up, his response was, I'll look at it. However, if the results are not in your favour, I will be publishing anyway. You have no control over that. And that was, I mean, he's very direct, as you know, and that was his response, and I was more than happy to accept that, because that's what we want. We do not want to be patronised, as was unfortunately done in the expert working group oral evidence, where they said, we actually thought about trying to find something. What a dreadful thing to say. What do they think that we want? All we want is, did it happen or did it not?
Can I just go back to your 4th recommendation?
You're going to make me remember these now, aren't you?
The recommendation about financial redress for women who lost their babies. Do you have any idea of numbers?
The ones at the moment that we have, I would say, maybe would be a quarter at the most.
Of your membership, right?
They won't be a great number, I wouldn't think. But it's also people, she was so dreadfully affected. She died 3 years ago. Now her mum looked after her. She's now in her mid-60s, and she said, I don't know what to do. My life has been caring for her for all these years, and so she's no training, no pension, and this is the other thing with some of our members, they haven't been able to work to actually gain a good standard of living, to make sure that they have a pension in old age. So these are things, again, whereby it's not just the emotional impact, it's only when you actually start to speak to the members that you realise the financial impact, which I definitely hadn't factored in at all, I'm ashamed to say. But it's only when, as you know, when you're speaking to people and they say, well no, I couldn't get a job and I've no pension and I'm really worried, and it's shocking to think that this impact has lasted for 50 years almost. But when I look at some of the other members, they've had half a life, and that's been devoted to their children. So that is the difficulty, and I appreciate that. And I don't know the answer. I really don't know how this would work, what kind of redress there would be. We're certainly not looking for millions. You know, it's not that kind of resolution. The resolution must be that it's acknowledged, that the mistakes are acknowledged, that it stops happening again, which we know it's happening again. We know that there's still that disconnect between something going wrong and the action, the appropriate action being taken. And I have to say, I did watch one of the reviews from two people from an IHR, I can't remember where now, and I was horrified because they didn't seem to know what was happening. They didn't have a process. It's just simple things where, you know, something happens, there should be some kind of process that's followed through. One of the things that did impress me, actually, and maybe it doesn't, but I did try and kind of push this towards the expert working group, and this was on future recommendations. In, I don't know if it was Norway or Sweden, they have an advert. It's a fabulous advert. It's just a little face that comes on and it bounces on the screen and it tells you if a drug is causing a problem. And you know, everybody watches the TV. And what a wonderful way just to have a tiny channel somewhere that people can flick onto and find out, be careful, or make sure you read this, or just that kind of information, because it's not getting through the doctor's surgery to the patient. And when it does, then the drawbridge goes up again, and it's again a defensive mode, as opposed to, and really and honestly, I think you'll find with most people, if it's a genuine mishap, this could actually be resolved much more quickly. But I don't know how that's going to happen. But certainly the process and looking at the people who are actually controlling that process did not fill me with confidence at all. Quite concerning.
Right, any questions?
No, that's been very good. Thank you.
Valerie? Simon?
No, that has been helpful. Thank you very much.
You mean I've just taught that much?
No, it has been extremely good, and I do want to thank you for everything you do for these women, and you always go the extra mile. No, not the extra mile, the extra miles, because and both physically, because I know you go to Europe and speak there and everything else, and you work with the parliamentary group and all the rest of it. And Mike, thank you for what you do to support Murray, because I know she relies on you.
I couldn't do it without him, absolutely not. I wouldn't eat.
So, can I say we'll do the very best we can, and we won't agree with everything that everybody's told us, you know, because we have to weigh it all up and then come to our conclusions and our recommendations.
I appreciate that. One thing I would ask is, do you, not the date, I appreciate you want to have a date, do you have a month or ish? No, you've no idea, have you?
What are you asking?
When it will be completed.
Right.
Is it this year?
Yes, we want to complete by the end of the year.
Okay.
I'd love to give you a date, but we've got a lot of work to do
I
now.
know, and
I
do
mean,
not
we've
envy
been
you.
doing the very interesting things about taking evidence and all of that, and now we've really got to put our heads down
And collate it,
and,
which is difficult.
yeah, and decide what we're going to say.
If there's anything that you need me to do, please let me know. Any information that you want clarification on, again, let me know. I know I did send you something on abortions that we found. That's the problem. There's so many documents all over the place that I'm so afraid of missing something that you really need to know about, which is a concern. But thank you again for your time and your questions. And I hope that we meet when you're actually having your conclusions ready. And I
Thank you very much.
Thank you.